LED panel lights are a great alternative to fluorescent tube fixtures, but they can be a little tricky to properly install and wire. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to install an LED panel that uses a surface mount frame. These don't typically come with adequate instructions on how to safely wire from the ceiling box to the panel wiring connections. Stay tuned and I'll show you how it's done. I get a lot of feedback on my fluorescent to LED tube conversion videos that LED conversion isn't worth the time and it's better just to buy an LED fixture. I don't agree this is always the right choice, but if you do decide to replace the fixture, I think an LED panel is worth considering, especially if the fixture will be installed in a garage, workshop, or work area. These panels put off a generous amount of light, they come in multiple color temperatures, and they don't have a lot of glare, so they're easy on the eyes. One downside to LED panels is that they can be tricky to install. Mounting the frame by yourself is very tricky, and wiring these can be a bit mysterious. Wiring these panels in a manner that is safe and code compliant took a lot of research, but I finally figured it out, and I'll save you a lot of time by demonstrating how to install these. As always, if any questions come up, feel free to ask those in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe and click that bell so if I ever make any updates, you'll be sure to get notified. Here are the basics of installing one of these panels. We assemble the frame first. This is quite easy. 4 sides, 4 screws on each of the short sides. Next, you'll mount the frame to the ceiling. Then you'll need to partially wire the LED panel, slide it into the frame, complete the wiring before fully sliding it into the frame. Then you replace one of the short sides and you're done. Here's the tricky part. Imagine this is the ceiling and your ceiling box. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to slide this panel into the frame and wire to this box. Having a wire from here to here and splices inside the boxes only is the tricky part. What we're basically going to do is we're going to create a very long pigtail to go from the LED driver panel to the ceiling box, and we're going to leave enough slack in that pigtail to allow us to slide the panel in, wire to the ceiling box, and then slide it in completely. So let me cover what you'll need for that. You'll need a 1/2-inch screw cable clamp connector designed to be used with non-metallic cables such as Romex. You'll need about 5 feet of non-metallic cable. You'll want to match the gauge to what gauge is currently on your circuit. You'll also need a plastic push-in connector, also 1/2-inch knockout, and you'll need a blank plastic ceiling box cover, with or without a knockout. Preferably with the knockout, but if you can't find one with a knockout, you can always just drill your own. It will require a 7/8" drill bit. Let's get started. We're going to start with the LED driver. We're going to wire there first. This is where our clamp connector comes in. Remove one of the knockouts. Now, you'll want the screws facing this way. You don't want to put it like this because the screws will then drive into the back of this and you won't be able to clamp it down all the way. All right, now we take our non-metallic cable and we want to strip off the sheathing. Before we do that, it's a little easier to go ahead and strip our wires. Okay. Now, before we tighten this down, let's go ahead and make our connections. You can't see it because it's very small, but it's marked here. It's usually also marked on the label which one's neutral and line. The two closest to the camera are neutral. The two closest to me are line. These are just push connectors. Sometimes it's easier to do both at the same time. Really depends on the luck of the draw, not this one. Alright, and I have to get a wire nut for the ground. My apologies, yes, you will need a wire nut for this. You'll also need wire nuts for the ceiling box. For some reason, they don't strip these ground wires very much. Alright. Alright, now we can go ahead and screw down our cable clamp. You don't have to torque it down, just make sure it's nice and secure. Before we put the panel cover back on, let's get a close-up here so you can see how this looks. If you have a 10-volt dimmer, which is kind of rare in a residential setting, you can also wire that if you have dimming capabilities on your panel. Those would be two smaller gauge wires that would be accompanied with your house wiring. Those would go here. Alright, now we can put the panel cover back on. And now we're going to cut our cable to length. I basically go a foot past the far end from the box. Which is about 4 feet of cable, give or take half a foot. Okay, now let's talk about the cover for your ceiling box. The reason I'm choosing plastic is because I have a plastic box. You don't want to choose metal if you have a plastic box, but you can. Just know that if you choose metal, you'll need to choose one with a grounding screw, and you're going to want to bond that screw to the ground, because if there's ever a loose connection and a hot wire touching that plate, it could shock you. That's why we want a plastic plate, or we want to ground it. If you have a metal box and it's already bonded to ground, then you can go ahead and use a metal plate and you don't have to worry about that grounding screw. Now, if you can't find one with a knockout, it's easy enough just to drill one of these with a 7/8 inch drill bit. That's what I had to do for these. What we're going to do, we're going to take our plastic push-in connector, we're going to insert that into our cover. We're going to insert our non-metallic cable into that. And then I'll go ahead and strip off the sheathing and strip the ends of the wires. Okay, now we're ready to install everything. We're going to start with the frame, my least favorite part, but first we go to our electrical panel and we shut off the circuit breaker to the light circuit where we're installing this panel. Now the frame can be difficult to install by yourself, so I created a template from a piece of cardboard. Make sure you square one corner of a template first. This will be the corner that we will align with our reference marks. My reference marks are based on my desired location. I wanted a certain number of inches from the wall and a certain number of inches from an adjacent fixture. You'll need 3 reference marks, 2 on one side of the corner and 1 on the other. 3 marks will ensure that you are square in relation to either adjacent walls or fixtures. This is a small template that only marks 3 anchor points. I tried making one to mark all 6, but it just wasn't very accurate, so this seemed to be the best bet. I now mark my reference points, 2 from an adjacent fixture and 1 from the wall. With the reference marks in place, I can then use my template to mark the holes. I use an awl to punch through the cardboard and mark the ceiling. After you mark these, you can hold the frame up to the ceiling to confirm that it lines up. If it does, go ahead and install 3 anchors. We'll then place the frame back up on the ceiling to mark the other 3 holes. Once all 6 anchors are installed, we can install the frame and remove one of the end pieces. You'll notice that I have already removed the old fixture, which means my circuit breaker has been shut off. Please make sure your breaker is off before doing any wiring. Now, before we go any further, make sure when you are selecting your location for the frame that you have enough clearance on the short end to insert the panel. I'm installing a 2x4 panel, so I need 4 feet on one side to slide the panel in. We slide the panel into the frame as far as possible without blocking access to the ceiling box. This way we can do our wiring. We use wire nuts to connect hot, neutral, and ground. We then attach the cover plate to the ceiling box and we're done with the wiring. Before you finish up the installation, I recommend turning on the breaker and testing the light before you slide the panel all the way in and installing the frame end piece. If everything works, you can then slide the panel in and attach that frame end. One question I expect to get is why not use an LED panel that has a mounting bracket that goes over the ceiling box? Isn't that easier? It is much easier, and if you can find a panel light that fits your needs, by all means explore that option. One advantage to these types of panels is that the panel doesn't have to be centered on the ceiling box. You have some freedom with panel placement. Okay, that's going to do it for today. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to drop a comment below letting us know how your project went. I'm Chris with Toolbox DIY. Thanks for watching.